Hey, welcome back. Next bit, the last bit of pearls on the body. Here we go. So before I start today, I'm going to dispel a few myths about what people are seeing here. These pearls are actually quite accurate to the original filming miniature. On the bottom area here, the window frame is white. That's fully masked off. So that's not a problem. That makes that bit quite easy. But you can see there's a band of darker grey in this area here. Now that band apparently is gold, but you can also see a darker grey area here. Now I'm thinking that's a different colour of pearl that's reflecting a different light back to the camera. And I'm thinking these are the same as well. Not necessarily flat grey, but I think they're a dark pearl. This one may be grey, difficult to tell. You see what I'm dealing with when you're looking at these references? This is obviously the other side of the ship. But if we go to here, we can see clearly now the banding on this particular side of the ship. Now this side doesn't appear to have much of the darker areas on it. So there's a mismatch from one side to the other. It's not symmetrical as far as I can tell from this image. So I'm going to add these bands here today. You can clearly see the pearls all over this section here in small little things. These are not tones of grey. These are pearls on top of maybe some grey detail underneath, but this is all pearls. I've interpreted it as having some grey detail underneath, which I did with a primer, and then the pearls allow that to show through a little bit for a kind of double detail hit. But these are definitely pearls, and that is the layout. So everybody who says there's no pearls on it, you are 100% wrong. This line here that appears grey is actually grey with a gold pearl over the top of it, so that makes a gold brick pattern on there. And the lines of the edges of the areas on the reference don't necessarily line up with the lines of the gold brick pattern, so that adds a little bit of detail, the white stripe between the thin bands here. So that's good. I'm trying to kind of copy that if I can. Okay, so that's the masking off and the gold on now. You can see there's a subtle shade here of the grey. When you don't see the pearl with the gold, it goes a nice grey colour, which is what they've used to make the panelling and little details. And that matches quite well in with the reference at the back now. There's a little bit of fudging because all the panel lines on here are not super accurate to the original, so there's always a little bit of a fudge. But we got the right kind of effect going now. The reference material and the model are kind of looking relatively similar, so that's okay. I'm happy with that. I'm going to flip it over and do the other side now. Okay, so we're getting through the masking now. I've got this section darker here masked off. I'm going to do this one after I've done the other ones. This is going to be gold, and I'm going to put a little bit of red on top of that. I'm going to go for a blue on here, I think, because they're quite dark, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to be dark grey. These are a nightmare, these references. Anyway, I'm going to go for those all the same tone. So that one, and that one will be the same. This one's going to be a slightly different pearl because it's not as dark as that. And then at the back here, there's a couple of little extra panels on top of the gold. I think I'll probably shade that. And then the rest of this side, I don't really have good reference for, but I'm going to make it up as I go along. Right, so final check. I've got this one here. I've got this front 3 bands here, well 2.5. 1, 2.5. Then we've got a space, then we've got the dark one here. Then we've got a space of 2.5, 1, 2.5. Then we've got half split underneath the middle window. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, and another half. So half, 1, 2, 3, and another half. We're having to go by the lines that are on the model here. These are all scribed in and everything when you get it, so I could move those around, but it's a bit late now. So then we've got a gap here with a darker one just here, then a white stripe, which is the black mask there. It's going to mask off the two little windows with a bit of globby fluid. Actually quite thick, this stuff. Works pretty good. It's a bit like a filler that you can pull out. Okay, so that's them done, and we're ready for another shot of gold. Right, so that's the gold pass done. Now I'm going to hit this one with a little bit of blue, I think I'm going to go for. This little piece on the reference itself here is shaded. So I'm going to be shading that from the bottom left-hand corner up to the right, just to give a graduation on the pearls there. I'm not just going to go for a single colour. Alright, I thought I'd show you an interesting tip. This is a compound surface, and this large fat piece of masking tape, which is following the edge of this line here, is wrapped around that surface slightly. So if you peel it consistently from one end, this masking tape's going to fold, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on the surface where the paint is. So you can inadvertently pluck paint by folding your masking tape around a compound surface when you take it off. So be very careful when you're pulling tape off surfaces that are curved. Try and release it carefully up to the edge that you've masked, and then you can take it off. And it won't put undue force on the paint that's sitting behind it. There you go, top tip. As the wind thrashes outside, it's time now to attack the strong backs. I'm trying to keep the colours fairly subdued, and I'll tell you why. When I was a kid, I used to go to quite a famous artist in the northern area, worked in oil colours. Very, very good influence on me he was. And one of his main things was, which is interesting, as you get further away into the distance, blacks become blacker, but they don't become darker. What he meant by that was, the closer you get to an object, the more colours and reflected colours you'll see in the surface. And as you get further away from it, the colours become much more muted and monotone. So if you paint a background with a nice dark object in the back, you can use black, but you bring it up from black to make it grey, because of the way the atmosphere scatters the particles and adds a haze in front of it. So when you're looking at a model like this, all these colours, from your viewpoint where we are now, we're probably, what, 700 or 800 metres away from this object. So what you don't want to do is make blacks black, and you don't want to make colours super vibrant, because that's what's lost in distance. So you don't want this to be highly invasive colour-wise to the eyes. You want it to be nicely subdued, as if you were looking at it through some kind of haze in an atmosphere from a certain distance away. I know it's in space, but the same kind of thing applies. I can see the spacing is pretty much okay there. I'm going to now rework this file to make it work, and then I'll be putting these on. So I wasn't happy with the settings on that laser cut piece, so I redid those, spaced out the patterns a little bit. Just take the tack off it all, and then I'm looking to arrange this one in the right spot on here. So, checking the reference, the front square needs to be equidistant from the top and the front. The second one needs to be in line, and the two little boxes at the end of that taper. So we look to be about there. Maybe up a fraction. looks better. I can see through the tape the positioning of it relative to the other colours on there, and I can see that I've got the border running around the top pretty much equidistant. It's slightly larger here as it is on the reference, and then these two little bits sit at the bottom of this triangle, which is about right. So yeah, I'm going to go with that. There are a few discrepancies on the shape of this because the model doesn't exactly match what's on the screen, but yeah, it's going pretty good. So I'm trying to keep all these markings fairly subdued. I don't want them to have a massive contrast, but I also want them to be varied in intensity a little bit, so they're not exactly the same all over the surface. I don't know if I can get my fingers under here to show you this, but because it's pretty damn small, but we'll give it a go. Hopefully you can see what's occurring. They are tiny, tiny, tiny little masks. Let's get that mask the right way up, shall we? We'll put it on upside down, that'd be a nightmare. Okay. So I'm looking at alignment with the other side, trying to get the two to kind of work together. I think we're about there somewhere. Okay, let's get them done. I'm doing it all incrementally because I don't want to go crazy and end up with everything in the wrong place. So all these little details are done as groups and clusters that I can see, and I'm trying to match those to fit these panels. These panels are slightly different shape than the ones on the original, so a little bit of fudging here and there, but the essence of it is pretty much there. So just measuring out now, making a new little CAD file for another detail. So once you get all these little bits done, the strong back looks something along the lines of this. Pretty complicated, but yeah, not too bad. I'm going to be adding a few little bits of shading to that later on. So neck area is not too bad. Another stripe to add there. And right, back onto the nacelles. So these areas need another 5 colours of pearl on the front just to match the rest of the body. This is a little chevron-y type thing that I put in, just to add detail to an area that I couldn't see specifically on the reference, but I think this is close enough. Now working on the rear landing bay door with some micro little masks. They're about 1/2 mil, those squares. It's a tiny, tiny little thing, but hey, it's coming together. Working on the double colours now. Do the red first, smaller mask applied over that. Then onto the mustardy colour, a little tiny shot of yellow just to brighten it up a touch. Right, so what I've done is I've masked up the deflector dish here, and I've painted it with pearls, but I put every colour of 5 pearls on. So it should give a relatively neutral reflectivity, a little bit like chrome, but not like it. Inside this little square in the masking there is purple and blue, because that's what's reflecting back if you check the motion picture, and hopefully that'll give kind of like a rainbowy type feel to that reflectivity, which is what I'm after. So we'll see how that looks when we get this off. So working on the little side pods that come up to the back of that deflector dish, I can see on the reference from the movie that there's a number of panels on here in pearl. So I've checked it a couple of times. This is a close approximation to what was there. It's it's starting to get really complicated, this model now. All these little surface details and textures add complexity to the final thing, so can't really not do them. But again, 5 colours on here. It's quite a complicated little Bueller. Some of the colours, pearls, go over the grey details, so you end up with a blue panel with a grey detail showing through. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. It's quite a laborious task doing all these little masks, but I think the end result is worth it. It's certainly going to be complicated enough. No one's going to get bored looking at this model, that's for sure. So the landing bay assembly is pretty much done. There's a few bits to do there. Complexity on the sides looking good. It's all looking quite sharp. So now we're on to the crazy little red details. Tiny, tiny little dots either side of the little raised areas on the spine. They are micro small. And now onto the deflector dish. Now the deflector dish is pretty weird on the motion picture version. A lot of it has all the pearls on simultaneously to give you a kind of pinky rainbow type affair. Then some other areas are silver and some other areas are pearl, red and blue. This area that I'm doing is actually chrome. It's like a little chrome trim that fits around that area on the deflector dish, so I'm replicating that, and yeah, it looks pretty good. Tiny, tiny details on the top of the saucer at the back there, on the impulse engines. Little teeny weeny red dots, and a few teeny weeny grey dots. Blending the blue. You can see a little bit of damage on the window frames on the back there. That's going to be sorted at the end with the final touch-up, just to make sure everything's good. And now we're applying all these little other panels around the saucer into their respective positions based on the reference. These will get hit with a lighter colour and then remasked just to leave a little bit of the white exposed on the edges. Not consistent on every one, just enough to give you a bit of detail. And then they go over with a slightly darker grey, and on top of that darker grey goes a red pearl. And then when that's done, these are going to have a gloss coating over the top, and then they're going to have the decals. Now onto the red stripes running around the centre section. These are an absolute nightmare. The kit is not fully symmetrical, so the wall height on either side of this central piece is not exactly square, and it varies a little bit around it. The original sculpt is not perfect. So what I'm trying to do is fudge these red lines and get them to look something about right. You can see I'm having trouble trying to get that rear end shaped nicely, just to try and make it equidistant on either side. So there's a bit of optical illusion stuff going on here with this, so I've got to be quite careful with it. Red's a nightmare colour, so if you screw it up, it's very difficult to get rid of. You can't paint white over it, it'll just go pink. So the red has to go on. If you need to remove it, the best way to do it is mask it off and sand it off the surface. But it's a pretty reckless thing to do, so watch out. This one came together pretty good. So we've got about a 1mm stripe all the way around these now. Now working onto the little tiny thrusters or whatever they are on the top of the saucer there. These get the same 2-colour transition. The masks are done with a 0.7 overlap, so hopefully it should give you about 1/2 mil line thickness, but in reality works out more like 3/4 to a mil. I'm putting on the mustardy colour, and then I'm going over that with a light grey, just to vary the colour within that panel. I don't want it to be like a decal. I want it to look a little bit more, painted. I'm rubbing down the corner of the masking with a little ball-ended sculpting tool, just to settle it down, make sure that the edges are in contact with the red before I put the mustard and the grey on. Flipped it over. Now on the bottom, do the same thing there. Then we're on to the next colour mask. That's got to be aligned with the 2 alignment marks on the masking piece that I've done. Rub the sides down with my little ball-ended tool. Paint the mustard. Get the angles, don't need any red shading on it, and then pop a little bit of grey on, and you get a really nice finish. Thanks for watching. Next time, more.